Mitrofan Golubev heard the Russian before he saw who was speaking it. Not the guttural Russian of Moscow's business elite, but a softer cadence, touched with the northern lilt of St. Petersburg, his mother's accent. It was a language he hadn't heard spoken like that in years. Not since the days when his mother hummed folk songs in the kitchen and read Pushkin aloud beside a fireplace. The words slipped through the cabin like incense, low and reverent. They were not meant for him. He looked up from the untouched glass of cognac on the polished tray table. Across from him, his father, Hilarion Bulgakov, sat rigid and silent in his custom leather seat. His weathered face was usually impassive. Since the stroke, English had been elusive for him. He understood it, even followed TV debates and political news. But he didn't speak it. Not anymore. Not with his aides. Not with Mitrofan. But now his father's eyes were wide. Alive. Focused. Mitrofan didn't look up. Another attendant. Another polite smile. Another person who would serve him champagne and pretend not to know who he was or what he did. He'd seen a dozen faces like that over the years. They blurred together. But then he heard it. A voice. Soft. Warm. Familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. Dobry den. Good afternoon. In Russian. Mitrofan's head snapped up. She stood near the galley, a slender young woman in a crisp navy uniform, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her face was pale, delicate, with high cheekbones and eyes the color of smoke, gray, watchful kind. She couldn't have been older than 23, maybe 24. She held a tray with bottled water and warm towels, and she was looking not at him, but at his father, and she was speaking Russian. Vydolzny vestelai pozl takogo dlinogo polita. She continued gently, stepping closer to Hilarion. You priniesla vam teplopolitensai vodu, esli vam edo nuzno. You must be tired after such a long flight. I brought you a warm towel and water, if you need it. Mitrofan sat frozen, his hands still gripping the empty glass. Hilarion's head turned, slowly, almost cautiously, as if he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. The girl, the stewardess, smiled. It wasn't a practiced smile. It wasn't the kind of smile people gave Mitrofan when they wanted something. It was real, shy, gentle. Minya zovet Angela, she said, kneeling slightly, so she was at eye level with the old man. Angela Kovaleva. Ya is Krasnodara. My name is Angela. Angela Kovaleva. I'm from Krasnodar. And then, for the first time in months, Mitrofan saw something he thought he'd never see again. His father smiled. Not a grimace. Not a polite upturn of the lips. A real smile. His eyes, dull and lifeless just moments before, brightened. His hand, gnarled and trembling, reached out toward the towel she offered, and when their fingers brushed, Hilarion said something Mitrofan hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. Spasibo, Devachka. Thank you, little one. His father's voice cracked with disuse, but it was there. It was there. Angela's smile widened, her eyes glistening just slightly. Potsaluista, she whispered. You're welcome. Mitrofan couldn't breathe. He watched as this stranger, this stewardess with a shy smile and a soft voice, spoke to his father, as if he were still the man he used to be. Not a broken shell, not a burden, but a person, a human being who deserved kindness. She handed Hilarion the towel, then poured him a glass of water, narrating her actions in Russian as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Hilarion listened, nodding, even chuckling softly at something she said about the turbulence over the Alps. And Mitrofan just stared. When Angela finally stood and turned toward him, her expression shifted, more reserved, more professional, but still kind. Dobry den, she said to him in Russian, then switched to English. Can I get you anything, Mr. Golubev? He should have answered, should have said something, anything. But all he could think was, who are you? And more urgently, where have you been? Have you ever witnessed a small act of kindness that changed everything? What would you do if you saw someone speak life back into a person everyone else had given up on? Drop your thoughts below. Mitrofan Golubev was not a man who believed in coincidence. In his world, everything happened for a reason, usually a calculated one. Deals were struck in shadow. Loyalties were bought. Enemies were eliminated before they became threats. He had learned early, watching his father navigate the brutal landscape of Russian organized crime, that survival meant control. Control over information. Control over people. Control over every variable that could turn against you. But he had no control over the way his heart had stuttered when Angela Kovaleva spoke to his father in their native tongue. The flight to Zurich continued without incident, but Mitrofan couldn't focus on the contracts waiting for him in his briefcase or the meeting scheduled with his Swiss bankers. Instead, he found himself watching the cabin door, waiting for Angela to return. When she did, offering beverages, checking on their comfort. She spoke to Hilarion in Russian and to Mitrofan in English, as if she understood instinctively that his father needed the connection more than he did. But Mitrofan needed it too. He just didn't know how to ask for it. By the time they landed, Hilarion looked more alive than he had in months. His eyes tracked Angela's movements, and when she helped him with his seatbelt before landing, he squeezed her hand and said, "Tina pomenish you doc. You remind me of my daughter." Mitrofan's throat tightened. His sister, Katia, had died when she was 19. A car accident in Moscow, 17 years ago. Hilarion rarely spoke of her, even before the stroke. Angela's expression softened with understanding. "Yuvrin, to ona bila prekrasna," she whispered. "I'm sure she was beautiful." Hilarion nodded, his eyes wet. As they disembarked, Mitrofan made a decision. He stopped Angela at the exit, his hand lightly touching her elbow. She turned, startled, those gray eyes meeting his with cautious curiosity. "Thank you," he said in English, his accent thick, but his sincerity unmistakable. "For speaking to him. For seeing him." Angela's cheeks flushed pink. "It was nothing. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I know what it's like to feel invisible in a language that isn't yours. I'm glad I could help." "It wasn't nothing," Mitrofan said firmly. Then, softer, "What airline do you work for?" "Constellation Private Services," she replied. "We're contracted for private charters across Europe and Asia." He filed the information away. "Will you be working the return flight to Moscow next week?" She blinked, surprised. I'm not sure. It depends on the scheduling." "Make sure you are," he said. It wasn't a request. But then he caught himself, seeing the flicker of unease cross her face. He softened his tone. "Please, my father would like to see you again." Angela studied him for a moment, and Mitrofan had the unsettling sense that she was seeing past the expensive suit and the cold authority, seeing something deeper. "I'll check with my supervisor," she said quietly. Then she smiled, that same shy, genuine smile, and disappeared into the jet service corridor. Mitrofan descended the stairs to the tarmac, where his driver waited beside a black Mercedes. Hilarion was already seated inside, and when Mitrofan slid in beside him, his father turned to him and said in Russian, "Good girl. Kind heart." Mitrofan nodded. "Yes, she is. You like her?" It wasn't a question. Mitrofan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a single encrypted message to his head of security. Find out everything about Angela Kovaleva. Discreetly. Angela Kovaleva had learned early in life that survival meant adaptability. Born in Krasnodar, a city in southern Russia near the Black Sea, she had grown up in a modest apartment with her mother, Irina, a schoolteacher, and her grandmother, Babushka Vera, who had survived the siege of Leningrad and never let anyone forget it. Her father had left when Angela was 4, disappearing into the oil fields of Siberia and never returning. She didn't remember much about him except the smell of cigarettes and the sound of her mother crying. Money was always tight. Angela wore hand-me-downs and learned to stretch every ruble. But her mother made sure she had books, and Babushka Vera filled the apartment with stories of war, of resilience, of a Russia that had suffered but never surrendered. It was Babushka Vera who taught Angela that language was power. "Learn English," she'd said. "Learn French. Learn anything you can. The world is bigger than Krasnodar, Devachka, and you are smart enough to see it." So Angela studied. She devoured languages the way other girls devoured fashion magazines. By 18, she was fluent in Russian, English, and French, with conversational German and Spanish. She dreamed of working for the United Nations, or Doctors Without Borders, or any organization that helped people caught between borders and wars and languages they couldn't speak. But dreams required money, and money required work. At 20, she'd taken a job as a flight attendant with a regional airline. The pay was modest, but it allowed her to travel, to practice languages, to save. When Constellation Private Services recruited her 2 years later, offering triple the salary to work on luxury charters, she'd accepted immediately. It wasn't the UN, but it was a step closer. Most of her passengers were wealthy, powerful, and utterly uninterested in her beyond the champagne she served. She'd learned to smile politely, stay invisible, and never ask questions, especially when the passengers were men, like Mitrofan Golubev. She knew who he was. Everyone in the Russian expatriate world knew the Golubev name. Mafia, billions in logistics and import-export, ties to oligarchs, politicians, and people who disappeared when they asked too many questions. She should have been terrified of him. But when she'd seen the old man sitting alone, his eyes empty, something in her heart had cracked. She'd heard him murmur something in Russian under his breath, a fragment of a prayer, maybe, or a memory. And before she could think better of it, she'd responded. She hadn't expected the son to look at her the way he did, like she'd performed a miracle, like she'd given him something he didn't know he needed. Now, back in her small apartment in Zurich, shared with 2 other flight attendants, Angela sat on her narrow bed and replayed the flight in her mind. Mitrofan Golubev was everything she should avoid. Dangerous, cold, untouchable. And yet, when he'd thanked her, there had been something raw in his voice, something human. She thought of his father's smile, the way Hilarion had called her Devachka, little one, the same name her babushka Vera used. Her phone buzzed. A message from her supervisor. You've been requested for the Golubev charter next Thursday. Moscow route. Confirm availability. Angela stared at the screen. She should say no. Should keep her distance from men like Mitrofan Golubev. But she thought of Hilarion's face, the light that had returned to his eyes. She typed back, confirmed, and told herself it was only because she wanted to help an old man feel less alone. Not because she couldn't stop thinking about the way his son had looked at her, like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. The return flight to Moscow was scheduled for 9 p.m. on a Thursday that felt more like winter than autumn. Angela arrived at the private terminal 2 hours early. As always, her uniform pressed, her hair smoothed into its regulation bun. She told herself the nervous flutter in her stomach was professional anxiety, nothing more. But when she saw Mitrofan Golubev standing on the tarmac beside his father, his long black coat billowing in the wind, she knew she was lying to herself. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, something unguarded flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or recognition. Then the mask returned, cool, controlled, impenetrable. Miss Kovaleva, he said, his accent wrapping around her name like velvet over steel. Thank you for accommodating us. Of course, she replied, keeping her voice steady. It's my pleasure. Hilarion's face lit up when he saw her. Angela, he called out in Russian, his voice stronger than it had been the week before. Ty Vernulis, you came back. She moved toward him instinctively, taking his outstretched hand. Connect no, ya Vernulis, she said warmly. Of course I came back. Did you think I would forget about you? Hilarion chuckled, a sound like rusty hinges creaking back to life. My son made sure you didn't forget. Angela's eyes darted to Mitrofan, who had the decency to look almost sheepish. I requested you specifically, he admitted. I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable. It should have. By every measure of self-preservation Angela possessed, it absolutely should have. But instead, she found herself saying, your father deserves to have someone speak his language. I'm happy to help. Something shifted in Mitrofan's expression, something that looked dangerously close to gratitude. The flight began smoothly. Angela settled Hilarion into his seat, bringing him hot tea with lemon and a blanket, chatting with him in Russian about the weather, about Moscow, about nothing and everything. The old man was animated in a way that seemed to surprise even Mitrofan, who watched from across the aisle with an intensity that made Angela hyper-aware of every movement she made. 2 hours into the flight, as they crossed over Poland, Hilarion fell asleep, his head tilted back, his breathing deep and even. Angela was in the galley preparing the evening service when Mitrofan appeared in the doorway. The space was small, meant for one person, and his presence filled it entirely. He was tall, easily 6'3", and broad-shouldered, with the kind of physical presence that came from violence as much as genetics. Angela's pulse quickened, but she didn't retreat. "Can I get you something, Mr. Golubev?" she asked, her hands steady as she arranged cups on a tray. "Mitrofan," he said quietly. "Please, call me Mitrofan." She hesitated, then nodded. "Mitrofan." He seemed to savor the sound of his name in her mouth. Then he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Angela set down the cup she was holding. "All right, why did you speak to my father that first day?" His blue eyes were searching, almost vulnerable. "You didn't know us. You had no reason to go out of your way. Why did you do it?" The question surprised her. She'd expected something else, an advance, maybe, or a veiled threat. But this was genuine curiosity, as if her kindness was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "I heard him speak Russian," Angela said simply, "and he looked lost. I know what that feels like, to be surrounded by people who don't understand you, to feel invisible." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Language isn't just words, Mitrofan. It's home. It's memory. It's everything you are when no one's watching." Mitrofan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You see things other people don't. Maybe I just pay attention." "No." He stepped closer, and Angela's breath caught. "It's more than that. You see people, not what they can do for you, not what they're worth. Just them." Angela's cheeks flushed. "I don't think that's so unusual. In my world." His laugh was bitter. "It's practically extinct." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, past the expensive clothes and the cold authority. And she saw what she'd glimpsed on that first flight. A man carrying something far heavier than wealth or power. Loneliness. Grief. A kind of exhaustion that no amount of money could cure. "What is your world exactly?" she asked softly. It was a dangerous question. She knew at the moment it left her lips. Mitrofan's expression hardened. "You don't want to know." "Maybe I do." "Why?" The word came out almost harsh. "Why would you want to know anything about me?" Angela met his gaze steadily. "Because your father loves you. And because when you thanked me last week, you looked like someone who'd forgotten what kindness felt like. That makes me curious." For a moment, Mitrofan looked like he might walk away. Then, instead, he did something Angela didn't expect. He smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile of a man used to getting his way, but something real. Something that transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges, revealing the boy he must have been before the world taught him to build walls. "You're dangerous," he said quietly. "Me?" Angela laughed, incredulous. "I'm a flight attendant from Krasnodar." You're dangerous," he repeated, "because you make me want to be honest. And honesty, in my world, gets people killed." The weight of those words settled between them like snow. Angela should have been afraid, should have excused herself, finished the flight professionally, and never accepted another Golubev charter. But instead, she heard herself say, "Then maybe you need to find a different world." Mitrofan stared at her, something fierce and fragile warring in his eyes. And then the plane hit turbulence. Sudden, violent, the kind that sent the galley tray crashing to the floor and threw Angela forward. Mitrofan's arms caught her instinctively, his hands gripping her waist as the aircraft bucked and shuddered. For a heartbeat, they were pressed together, her palms flat against his chest, his face inches from hers. She could feel his heart pounding, could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes, could smell cedar and something darker, like gunpowder and expensive cologne. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough. Angela nodded, unable to speak. The turbulence subsided as quickly as it had begun, but neither of them moved. "Angela," Mitrofan said, and the way he said her name, like a prayer, like a confession, made something inside her crack wide open. Then Hilarian's voice called from the cabin. "Mitya? Angela, uso poradki?" "Everything okay?" The spell broke. Angela stepped back, smoothing her uniform, her hands trembling. "I should check on the passengers." "Angela." "Excuse me," she said, and slipped past him into the cabin. But as she attended to Hilarian, reassuring him in Russian that everything was fine, she could feel Mitrofan's eyes on her. And she knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that nothing would ever be fine again, because she'd just done the most foolish thing a woman in her position could do. She'd started to care about Mitrofan Golubev, and in his world, caring was the most dangerous thing of all. The weeks that followed became a carefully choreographed dance between proximity and distance. Mitrofan began flying more frequently, or so it seemed. Prague, Vienna, Geneva, back to Zurich, always with Hilarion, always requesting Angela specifically. Constellation Private Services was more than happy to accommodate their wealthiest client, and Angela found herself on Golubev charters twice, sometimes 3 times a week. Each flight followed a pattern. Angela would greet Hilarion warmly, speaking to him in Russian, drawing out stories about his childhood in Moscow, his years building an empire, his late wife, Mitrofan's mother, who had died of cancer when Mitrofan was 16. The old man spoke more with each passing flight, his words flowing easier, his laughter coming quicker. He was coming back to life, piece by piece, memory by memory. And Mitrofan watched it all with an expression Angela couldn't quite read. Sometimes he joined their conversations, translating when Angela's Russian stumbled over complex phrases, adding details to his father's stories. Other times he sat in silence, working on his laptop or staring out the window, but always listening, always aware of her. The tension between them was palpable, a live wire humming beneath every interaction. Angela told herself she was just doing her job, that the way her heart raced when Mitrofan entered the cabin was simply adrenaline, that the warmth spreading through her chest when he smiled at something his father said was professional satisfaction, nothing more. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she couldn't lie to herself. She was falling for a man she had no business even knowing. It was during a flight to St. Petersburg that everything shifted. They were 4 hours into the journey when Hilarion suddenly clutched his chest, his face going pale. Angela was at his side in seconds, her training kicking in with sharp precision. "Hilarion, posmotri nam menya," she said firmly, gripping his hand. "Look at me. Dishi so noi. Doc. Vidoc. Breathe with me. In. Out." Mitrofan was there instantly, his phone already at his ear, barking orders in Russian to whoever was on the other end. "Get a medical team to Pulkovo Airport. Now. I don't care what it costs. Have them ready when we land." But his free hand found his father's shoulder, steady and sure. "Papa, Tivy Poryak. Ma pakti prabilsai. Papa, you're okay. We're almost there." Hilarion's breathing was labored, his grip on Angela's hand crushing. She kept talking to him, kept her voice calm and measured, even as her own heart hammered against her ribs. She checked his pulse, elevated but not critical, monitored his breathing, kept him focused on her voice. "Raskazy mini o svoyi zhena," she said softly. "Tell me about your wife." "Kaki Izvali." "What's her name?" "Svetlana." Hilarion gasped. She had eyes like yours. Gray, like winter morning. "Beautiful name," Angela murmured. "Tell me how you met her." And Hilarion did. Haltingly, between labored breaths, he told her about a girl he'd seen at a bus stop in Moscow, 1975, her scarf covered in snow. How he'd offered her his coat. How she'd laughed and called him a fool. How he'd married her 6 months later. By the time they landed, Hilarion's color had returned. The medical team determined it was a panic attack triggered by altitude and stress, not a heart attack. But the fear had been real. The reminder of mortality had been stark. Mitrofan didn't leave his father's side at the hospital, and neither did Angela. She should have returned to her hotel, should have maintained professional boundaries. But when Mitrofan looked at her across the sterile waiting room and said quietly, "Please stay," she couldn't bring herself to leave. They sat in silence for a long time, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of antiseptic sharp in the air. Finally, Mitrofan spoke. "You saved his life today." "I just kept him calm," Angela protested. "The doctors." "You saved his life," Mitrofan repeated, his voice brooking no argument. If he'd panicked further, if his heart had given out before we landed, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Angela studied his profile, the strong jaw, the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the way his hands gripped his knees like he was holding himself together by sheer will. "He's lucky to have you," she said softly. Mitrofan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm the reason he's broken, Angela. I'm the reason he can't live a normal life. Do you know what I am? What I do? I know enough." "No." He turned to face her, and the rawness in his expression stole her breath. "You don't." You think you do, but you see the version of me I am when I'm with him. When I'm with you. You don't see the man who orders executions over breakfast, who launders money through legitimate businesses, who has blood on his hands that will never wash clean. Angela's throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're getting close to. Because every time you smile at me, every time you speak Russian to my father, every time you look at me like I'm something other than a monster, I feel myself wanting things I have no right to want. What things? The question came out as barely a whisper. Mitrofan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping low. Normalcy. Peace. A life where I don't have to sleep with a gun under my pillow. A woman who looks at me the way you do and doesn't fear what I'll become when the sun goes down. Angela's heart clenched. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. Maybe. She shifted closer, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. But I'm more afraid of living a life where I don't take chances. Where I don't speak to the lonely old man on the plane. Where I walk away from something just because it's complicated. Complicated. Mitrofan's laugh was rough. Angela, if you knew half of what my life entails, then tell me, she challenged. Not to scare me away, but because if we're going to keep doing this, whatever this is, I need to understand your world. Mitrofan looked at her for a long moment, something like wonder dawning in his eyes. You're serious. I'm curious, she corrected. There's a difference. He shook his head slowly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth despite everything. You're going to ruin me, Angela Kovaleva. Or maybe I'll help you build something better. Before Mitrofan could respond, a doctor emerged from the examination room, speaking rapid Russian. Hilarion was stable. He could be discharged in the morning. He needed rest, reduced stress, and regular monitoring, but he would be fine. The relief that washed over Mitrofan's face was profound. That night, he insisted on driving Angela to her hotel himself. His driver waited with the car, while Mitrofan walked her to the entrance of the modest building near Nevsky Prospect. Thank you, he said again. For today. For all of it. Angela smiled. You've already thanked me 3 times. I'll thank you 30 more if that's what it takes for you to understand what you've given us. Us, she teased gently. Or you. Mitrofan's expression grew serious. Both. The streetlights cast long shadows across his face. Snow had begun to fall. The first of the season, dusting his dark hair with white. He looked younger somehow, more vulnerable, like the armor he wore so carefully had finally cracked. Angela, he said, and the way he said her name made her shiver. I want to see you again. Not on a flight. Not because my father needs you. Because I do. Her breath caught. Mitrofan. I know I shouldn't ask. I know you have every reason to say no. But I'm asking anyway. He stepped closer, and she could see the conflict warring in his eyes. Desire and duty, hope and fear. Have dinner with me. Tomorrow night. Let me show you St. Petersburg the way it should be seen. Every rational part of Angela's brain screamed at her to decline, to maintain boundaries, to protect herself. But her heart, foolish, hopeful, reckless, was already answering. Yes, she whispered. Mitrofan's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't actually expected her to agree. Then that slow, devastating smile spread across his face. The real one, the one that transformed him entirely. Yaini Razakiyatebia, he said softly in Russian. I won't disappoint you. You better not, Angela replied, trying to sound stern but failing miserably. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent electricity racing up her arm. Spokojnoi nochi, Angela. Good night, Angela. Spokojnoi nochi, she echoed. She watched him walk back to the car, his long coat billowing behind him like something from a film. He turned back once, catching her eye, and even from a distance, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. When she finally made it up to her room, Angela sat on the edge of the bed, her hands still tingling where his lips had touched. She was playing with fire. She knew it. But for the first time in her careful, practical life, she didn't care. St. Petersburg in October was a city of contrasts. Golden leaves against gray skies. Imperial architecture beside Soviet concrete. Beauty and melancholy intertwined like lovers who couldn't let go. Mitrofan picked Angela up at 7 p.m. in a car far less ostentatious than she'd expected. A dark blue sedan, understated and elegant. He wore black jeans and a charcoal sweater instead of his usual suits, and the casualness made him seem almost like a normal man taking a woman on a normal date. Almost. "You look beautiful," he said when she slid into the passenger seat, and the sincerity in his voice made her glad. She'd chosen the simple burgundy dress and warm coat. "You clean up well yourself," she replied, and was rewarded with that smile. He drove them through the city as dusk settled over the Neva River, pointing out landmarks. The Church of the Savior on spilled blood with its colorful domes, the Winter Palace glowing against the darkening sky, the bridges that would rise at midnight to let ships pass through. "My mother used to bring me here," he said as they walked along the embankment, the wind off the river biting but invigorating. "Before everything changed. Before my father's business became what it is. She loved this city. Said it was proof that beauty could survive anything. Wars, revolutions, terrible leadership. It just endured." Angela pulled her coat tighter. "Do you miss her?" "Every day." His voice was quiet. "She was the only person who ever made my father soft. The only one who could talk him out of his anger. When she died, he became harder. And so did I." They walked in silence for a moment, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Is that when you took over the family business?" Angela asked carefully. Mitrofan nodded. "I was 16, old enough to understand what needed to be done, young enough to think I was invincible." He paused, staring out at the dark water. "My father built an empire on fear and loyalty. I inherited both. And for 16 years, I've maintained it the only way I knew how, by being more ruthless than anyone else, by never showing weakness, by making sure everyone knew that crossing the Golubev family meant death." Angela absorbed this, her heart heavy. "And now I'm 32 years old, and I'm tired." The admission seemed to cost him. "I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering which of my associates will betray me next. Tired of attending funerals for men who died because of decisions I made." He turned to face her, his blue eyes searching hers. "And then you spoke Russian to my father, and for the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to be human." Angela's throat tightened. "Mitrofan, I need to tell you something," he interrupted. "And after I do, you'll probably want to leave. You'll probably never want to see me again. But you deserve to know the truth." Fear flickered through her. "What truth?" He took a breath, as if steeling himself. 3 weeks ago, after our first flight, I had you investigated." Angela's blood went cold. "What?" "I needed to know who you were. If you were a threat. If someone had sent you to get close to my father, to me. So I had my security team look into your background." He held her gaze, unflinching. "I know about your mother in Krasnodar, your grandmother who survived Leningrad, your father who abandoned you. I know you send half your salary home every month. I know about your dream to work with refugees, to be an interpreter for humanitarian organizations. I know everything, Angela." She stepped back, anger and betrayal warring inside her. "You had no right." "I know." His voice was rough with regret. "I know I didn't. But that's who I am. That's what my world demands. Trust no one. Verify everything. Protect yourself at all costs." "And what did you find?" Her voice shook. "What terrible secrets did I have that justified invading my privacy?" "Nothing." The word came out like a confession. "I found nothing except a good woman trying to build a better life. A daughter who loves her family. A person who sees the world the way it should be, not the way it is." He moved closer, his expression raw, and that terrified me more than any threat ever could. "Why?" Angela demanded, tears stinging her eyes. "Because it meant you were real. Because it meant I couldn't protect myself from you by finding some flaw, some reason to push you away. Because it meant that when I fell," he stopped himself, jaw clenching. "When you fell what?" Angela whispered. "Mitrofan's walls crumbled. When I fell in love with you, it would be the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. The world seemed to stop. The wind, the river, the city lights, everything froze." "You what?" Angela could barely form the words. "I'm falling in love with you, Angela Kovaleva." His voice was steady now, certain. "Maybe I started falling that first day, when you smiled at my father like he mattered. Maybe it was when you challenged me in the galley, telling me I needed a different world. Maybe it was yesterday, watching you hold his hand while he struggled to breathe, giving him hope when I had none left to give. I don't know when it happened, but it's happening, and I can't stop it." Angela's heart hammered, so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. You investigated me. You invaded my privacy. You. I did, he agreed. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to understand that in my world, everyone is a potential enemy. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. Except you. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, but not touching. You're the first person in 16 years who's wanted nothing from me except honesty. Who's looked at me and seen a man, not a weapon or a wallet or a way up. Tears spilled down Angela's cheeks. I should walk away right now. I should get as far from you as possible. Yes, Mitrofan agreed quietly. You should. Your world is dangerous. You said so yourself. It is. You've done terrible things. I have. And you'll probably do more terrible things in the future. Probably. He finally touched her then, his thumb gently brushing away a tear. But I swear to you, Angela, I will never let that world touch you. I will never let anyone hurt you because of me. I will build walls so high around you that nothing, not my enemies, not my past, not even my own darkness will ever reach you. You can't promise that, Angela said, but her voice had lost its anger, replaced by something softer, something fragile. No, he admitted, but I'll die trying. She looked up at him. This dangerous, complicated, broken man who'd somehow become essential to her in a matter of weeks. She should run, should protect herself, should choose the safe path. But Angela Kovaleva had never been good at playing it safe. I'm angry at you, she said firmly. You should be, and I don't forgive you for invading my privacy. I don't expect you to, but, she took a shaky breath, but I understand why you did it. And I'm choosing to believe that the man standing in front of me right now, the one who's being honest even when it hurts, is the real Mitrofan Golubev. Hope flickered in his eyes. Angela, I'm not saying I love you back, she interrupted quickly. I'm not ready for that. But I'm saying I want to know you, the real you. Not the mafia boss, not the billionaire, just Mitya. She used the diminutive of his name, the one his father used. Can you show me him? Mitrofan's expression transformed, relief and wonder and something that looked like salvation all at once. Yes, he breathed. God, yes. And then he kissed her. It wasn't tentative or careful. It was desperate and honest, and full of all the words neither of them had said. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious, something worth protecting, and Angela's arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, diving into the dangerous beauty of falling for a man she barely knew but somehow understood completely. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, snowflakes had begun to fall around them, catching in Angela's hair on Mitrofan's eyelashes. Come with me, he said roughly. Where? To see my father. At the estate. Not as his nurse or his stewardess, but as, he hesitated, vulnerable, as someone important to me, as someone he should know properly. Angela smiled through her tears. I'd like that. They drove to the Golubev estate outside the city, a sprawling property behind high walls and security gates that opened at Mitrofan's approach. But inside, the house was warm, filled with photographs and books, and the smell of home-cooked food. Hilarion was waiting in the library, and when he saw Angela, his entire face lit up. Devachka, Ty Prishla. Little one, you came. Konechno, Angela said, embracing the old man. Of course. Hilarion looked between her and his son, and something knowing sparkled in his eyes. Mitya, Ty Durak, Esliot Pustisha. Mitya, you're a fool if you let this one go. Mitrofan smiled, genuine, warm, unguarded. Yeah, any planeru, Papa. I don't plan to Papa. And as they sat together by the fire, speaking Russian and English interchangeably, sharing stories and tea and laughter, Angela felt something shift inside her. She was in dangerous territory now, the point of no return. But looking at Mitrofan across the firelight, seeing the man he was when the armor came off, she realized she'd already made her choice. She just hoped she was strong enough to survive what came next. The next 6 weeks were the happiest Angela had ever known, and the most terrifying. She and Mitrofan fell into a rhythm. Between her flights, he would meet her in whatever city she landed, Prague, Vienna, Berlin. They would walk through cobblestone streets, share meals in quiet restaurants, talk until dawn about everything and nothing. He told her about his mother's garden, about the sister he'd lost, about the weight of carrying a legacy built on blood. She told him about her dreams, her fears, her babushka Vera's stories of survival. He never hid what he was. There were nights when his phone would ring and his face would harden, when he'd step away to speak in clipped Russian to men whose names Angela didn't want to know. There were mornings when she'd see exhaustion etched in every line of his face, and she'd know he hadn't slept, that he'd spent the night handling business he'd never fully explain. But when he was with her, he was just Mitya, the man who brought her coffee exactly how she liked it, who learned French phrases to impress her, who listened to her talk about refugee crises and humanitarian work with genuine interest instead of dismissal. And slowly, impossibly, Angela fell in love with him. She didn't plan to. She certainly didn't want to. But love didn't ask permission. Hilarion improved dramatically with Angela's regular visits. His doctors were amazed at his progress. His mood, his cognitive function, even his physical health seemed to strengthen. He began attending physical therapy, speaking more English, even venturing out to museums and concerts with Mitrofan and Angela. "You brought my father back to me," Mitrofan told her one evening as they stood on his apartment balcony overlooking the Moscow River. "You brought me back to myself." Angela leaned into his warmth, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "You did that yourself. I just reminded you it was possible. I want you to move here," he said suddenly. "To Moscow. I'll buy you an apartment, anywhere you want. You can stop working for the airline. Mitrofan." Angela turned in his arms, her expression gentle but firm. "I can't do that." His face fell. "Why not?" "Because I need to be my own person. I need to work, to have my own life, my own purpose. If I let you take care of everything, I'll lose myself, and you'll lose the woman you fell in love with." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm sorry. I want you close. I want to protect you." "I know." She kissed him softly. "But I don't need protection. I need partnership. Then we'll find a way," he promised. "Whatever you need, we'll make it work." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The call came on a Wednesday morning in late November. Angela was in Zurich, preparing for a flight to Dubai, when her phone rang. Her mother's number. She answered immediately. "Mama." "Angela." Her mother's voice was thick with tears. "It's babushka Vera. She's in the hospital. She fell. The doctors say it's her heart. She doesn't have much time." The world tilted. "I'm coming home," Angela said immediately. "Tell her I'm coming. Tell her to hold on." She called Mitrofan as she rushed to book a flight to Krasnodar. He answered on the first ring. "Angela, what's wrong?" She told him, her voice breaking. "I need to go to her. I need to." "I'm sending the jet," he said immediately. "It'll be there in 2 hours. Don't argue. Let me do this for you." She wanted to protest, to maintain her independence. But this was her babushka, the woman who'd raised her, who'd taught her that survival meant strength and love meant sacrifice. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm coming with you," he added. "Mitrofan, you don't have to." "I'm coming with you," he repeated firmly. "You're not doing this alone." They arrived in Krasnodar 12 hours later. The hospital was small, understated, nothing like the gleaming medical facilities Mitrofan was accustomed to. But he said nothing, just held Angela's hand as they navigated the corridors to her grandmother's room. Babushka Vera looked impossibly small on the hospital bed, her once strong frame diminished, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. But her eyes, sharp and knowing, locked onto Angela the moment she entered. "Devatka moya," she breathed. "My little one." Angela collapsed at her bedside, clutching her grandmother's hand. "Yezdis, babushka. Just this. Punto. I'm here, babushka. I'm here." They spoke in rapid Russian, words tumbling over each other, apologies and reassurances and love. Mitrofan stood back, giving them space, but babushka Vera's eyes found him. "Ito on?" she asked Angela. "Is that him?" Angela glanced back at Mitrofan, her eyes red. "Ito Mitrofan. Yes, this is Mitrofan." Babushka Vera studied him with the kind of penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through flesh to soul. Then she gestured him closer. Mitrofan approached, and to Angela's surprise, he knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to the old woman's eye level. "Ty lubish moyu vnuchku?" Babushka Vera asked bluntly. "Do you love my granddaughter?" Bolshi Zizny. Mitrofan replied without hesitation. More than life. She is too good for your world. I know. You will bring her pain. I will try not to. But yes. Probably. Babushka Vera's lips twitched. At least you're honest. She reached out with her free hand, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. If you hurt her, I will haunt you from beyond the grave. Do you understand? Yapanamul. Mitrofan said solemnly. I understand. The old woman held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. Korosho. Good. Angela's mother arrived shortly after. A tired woman in her 50s who looked at Mitrofan with suspicion and fear, but was too polite to say anything. Over the next 3 days, Angela barely left her grandmother's side. Mitrofan stayed close, handling logistics, arranging for better medical care, making sure Angela ate and rested even when she didn't want to. On the 4th day, as snow fell softly outside the hospital window, Babushka Vera squeezed Angela's hand. Live big, Devachka, she whispered. Don't let fear make you small. The world needs your voice, your languages, your heart. Her eyes drifted to where Mitrofan sat in the corner, reading. Even dangerous men need good women, especially dangerous men. Babushka, I'm not afraid of dying, Angela. I survived war. I survived Stalin. I survived everything. This is just the next thing. She smiled weakly. But you're just beginning. So live. Promise me. Yo, Beshcho. Angela sobbed. I promise. Babushka Vera closed her eyes. Korosho. She died 2 hours later, peacefully, with Angela holding one hand and her mother holding the other. The funeral was small but dignified. Mitrofan stood beside Angela throughout, a silent pillar of strength. He spoke to no one except to offer quiet condolences in Russian. And when Angela finally broke down, really, truly broke down, he was there to catch her. That night, at her mother's apartment, Angela sat on the narrow bed of her childhood and stared at the walls covered in faded wallpaper. Mitrofan found her there, bringing tea she didn't drink. I'm sorry, he said quietly, sitting beside her. She was 93. Angela said numbly. She lived a full life. I should be grateful she didn't suffer long. You can be grateful and heartbroken at the same time. Angela turned to him, tears streaming down her face. She was the reason I believed in strength, in survival, in beauty existing even in terrible places. And now she's gone, and I don't know how to be the person she thought I could be. Mitrofan pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest. You already are that person, Angela. You don't need her permission anymore. You just need to keep going. But even as he held her, Angela felt something shifting inside her. Her grandmother's death had reminded her how fragile everything was, how quickly life could be taken, how dangerous it was to love someone whose world was built on violence. Mitrofan, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. He pulled back slightly, studying her face. What is it? I got an email 2 weeks ago. She took a shaky breath. From the International Refugee Organization. They're offering me a position in Tbilisi, Georgia, as a translator and liaison for Syrian and Afghan refugees. It's everything I've been working toward, everything I've dreamed of. Mitrofan went very still. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Angela's voice cracked. Before my grandmother died, before all of this, I was going to turn it down. Because of you. Because of us. But now you're wondering if loving me is worth giving up your dreams. She looked at him with anguished eyes. I'm wondering if I can survive in your world, Mitrofan. I'm wondering if every time you leave to handle business, I'll be terrified you won't come back. I'm wondering if one day, someone will use me to hurt you, or hurt me to send you a message. I'm wondering if love is enough when the foundation is built on quicksand. Mitrofan's face had gone carefully blank, that mask she hadn't seen in weeks sliding back into place. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, Angela whispered. And I don't know if asking you to change is fair when your world is all you've ever known. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Mitrofan stood. His voice, when he spoke, was controlled. Too controlled. You should take the job in Tbilisi. Angela's heart cracked. What? You should take it. Build your career. Help the people you've always wanted to help. Live the life you planned before I complicated everything. Mitrofan. I won't trap you, Angela. I won't be the cage that keeps you from flying. He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was staggering. I love you enough to let you go. That's not what Angela stood, reaching for him, but he stepped back. I need to get back to Moscow. My father needs me. The business needs me. His voice was hollow. Take care of yourself, Angela Kovaleva. And thank you for everything you gave us. And then he was gone. Angela stood in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by memories and grief, and realized she'd just lost two of the most important people in her life in the span of 4 days. She thought she was being honest, thought she was expressing her fears so they could work through them together. But she'd forgotten that men like Mitrofan Golubev didn't know how to fight for love. They only knew how to sacrifice it. Angela spent 3 weeks in Krasnodar helping her mother sort through Babushka Vera's belongings. Every photograph, every letter, every worn book felt like a piece of her heart being cataloged and boxed away. But it was in a small wooden chest at the bottom of her grandmother's wardrobe that Angela found the letters. Dozens of them, yellowed with age, written in careful Russian script. Love letters from her grandfather, a man who died before Angela was born, written during the war. Letters that spoke of fear and hope, of loving a woman so fiercely that even the threat of death couldn't diminish it. One letter, dated 1943, made Angela stop breathing. My Vera, they tell me I'm a fool for writing to you. They say the war will take me, and these words will only cause you pain when I'm gone. But I write anyway, because love is not about safety, my darling. It's about choosing someone even when the world burns. Even when fear whispers that it's easier to be alone. I am afraid every day. Afraid of dying. Afraid of never seeing your face again. But I am more afraid of a life where I never told you that you were worth every risk, every danger, every impossible choice. If I die tomorrow, let me knowing I loved you with everything I am. Her grandfather had survived the war, had come home to Babushka Vera, had built a life with her despite the odds. Angela sat on the floor of her grandmother's empty apartment, the letter trembling in her hands, and finally understood what her babushka had been trying to tell her in those final moments. Live big. Don't let fear make you small. She'd let fear drive Mitrofan away, had let her terror of his world eclipse the reality of who he was. A man trying desperately to be better. A man who'd shown her nothing but honesty, even when it hurt. A man who loved her enough to let her go because he thought that's what she wanted. But it wasn't what she wanted. She wanted him. Dangerous world and all. Angela pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called him. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She tried again and again. Each time, voicemail. Finally, she called the one person she knew would answer. Angela. Hilarian's voice was warm, but surprised. Devachka Cacti, how are you? Yeah, and he's Nayu, she admitted. I don't know. Hilarian, where's Mitrofan? I've been trying to call him for 3 days. There was a long pause. He didn't tell you. Ice flooded her veins. Tell me what? He's in the hospital. There was an incident with a rival organization. He was shot. The world tilted violently. What? When? How badly? 5 days ago. He's stable now, but Hilarian's voice grew heavy. He made me promise not to tell you. Said you moved on. Said you deserved your new life without his darkness in it. That idiot. Angela breathed, already grabbing her bag. What hospital? Angela, you don't need to. What hospital? Hilarian. He told her. Moscow's Central Clinical Hospital. Private wing, top floor. Angela was on a plane within 2 hours. She arrived in Moscow just after midnight. The hospital was a modern glass building, heavily secured. When she gave Mitrofan's name at the desk, the receptionist made a call, and within minutes, a man in a dark suit appeared, one of Mitrofan's security team. Miss Kovaleva, he said, studying her with sharp eyes. Mr. Golubev didn't inform us you'd be visiting. That's because he's a stubborn fool who thinks he's protecting me, Angela said firmly. Now take me to him, or I'll find him myself. Something like amusement flickered across the guard's face. 10th floor, room 1008. But miss, he's not in a good mood. Good. Neither am I. The elevator ride felt eternal. When she finally reached his room, another guard stood outside, but he stepped aside after a brief phone call. Angela pushed open the door. The room was dimly lit, machines beeping softly. And there, in the hospital bed, was Mitrofan. He looked terrible, pale, bruised, his left shoulder heavily bandaged. But he was alive, breathing, real. His eyes snapped open at the sound of the door, and when he saw her, a dozen emotions flickered across his face. Shock, joy, fear, pain. Angela. His voice was rough. What are you doing here? She crossed the room in 3 strides. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Her voice rose. You were shot. Mitrofan. Shot. And you didn't tell me. You were in Krasnodar. Grieving. I didn't want to. To what? Burn me? Make me worry. Tears streamed down her face. I've been calling you for 3 days, thinking you were ignoring me, when you were lying in a hospital bed. I didn't want you to see me like this, he said quietly. Didn't want to pull you back into the violence. You were right, Angela. My world is dangerous. This proves it. No. Angela sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand carefully. This proves that life is dangerous. Love is dangerous. But we don't get guarantees. Mitrofan. My grandfather wrote letters to my grandmother during a war, knowing he might die any day. My babushka survived Stalin and the siege of Leningrad. They didn't let fear make them small, and I won't either. Mitrofan stared at her, his blue eyes wide. What are you saying? I'm saying I was wrong. I was scared, and I let that fear drive you away. But I've spent 3 weeks without you, and I've realized something. I don't want a safe life if it means a life without you. She squeezed his hand. Yes, your world is dangerous. Yes, there'll be risks. But I'd rather face those risks with you than spend my life wondering what we could have been. Angela, I love you, she interrupted. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was too afraid, too worried about what it meant. But I love you, Mitrofan Golubev, and I'm choosing you, all of you. The mafia boss and the son and the man who brings me coffee exactly how I like it. Mitrofan's composure cracked. He pulled her closer, carefully, mindful of his injuries, and buried his face in her hair. Yatak skukul patib, he whispered. I missed you so much. Every day, every moment. I thought I was doing the right thing, letting you go, but it was killing me. Then don't let me go again, Angela said fiercely. We'll figure out the rest together. He pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. What about Tbilisi? Your dream job. Angela smiled through her tears. I'll take it. But on weekends, holidays, whenever I can, I'll come back to you. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe you could visit me there. See what my work looks like. Meet the people I'm trying to help. You want me to come to Georgia? He sounded amazed. I want you to see my world the way I've seen yours. I want you to understand why I do what I do. And maybe, she took a breath, maybe you'll find something there too. A different way to use your resources. Your connections. Not for violence, but for good. Mitrofan stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, incredibly, he smiled. You're trying to redeem me. I'm trying to give you options, Angela corrected. What you do with them is up to you. He kissed her then, carefully, tenderly, like she was something precious he'd thought he'd lost forever. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Angela agreed, smiling against his lips. But you're stuck with me anyway. Yalyublu Tebia, he whispered. I love you. Yatos Tebia Lyublu, she whispered back. I love you too. Outside the window, Moscow glittered in the darkness, a city of contradictions and second chances. And inside that hospital room, 2 people who'd found each other across impossible distances decided that love was worth fighting for. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Mitrofan was released from the hospital 10 days later, against his doctor's advice, but with Angela's reluctant approval. The shooting had been a message from a Georgian crime family attempting to muscle into his territory. A reminder that even billionaires weren't untouchable. We handled it, was all Mitrofan would say when Angela asked, and the coldness in his voice reminded her that the man she loved was still very much the Pak Han, the boss of a criminal empire. But something had shifted in him. She could see it in the way he looked at her, in the questions he started asking. Tell me about this job in Tbilisi, he said one evening as they sat in his apartment, her curled against his uninjured side. What exactly would you be doing? Angela looked up at him, surprised. You really want to know? I really want to know. So she told him about the refugee camps overflowing with people fleeing war in Syria, Afghanistan, Chechnya, about families torn apart by violence, children who'd seen horrors no child should witness, women who'd lost everything but still fought to build new lives. about how language barriers trap them, unable to access medical care, legal services, education, and how interpreters like her could be the bridge between survival and hopelessness. The IRC, International Refugee Committee, runs a center in Tbilisi, she explained. They need Russian, Arabic, and English speakers desperately. I'd be translating for medical appointments, legal consultations, helping families navigate asylum processes. It's hard work, emotionally draining, and the pay is terrible. She smiled ruefully. But it's what I've always wanted to do. Mitrofan was quiet for a long time, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her shoulder. You know, he said finally, I have contacts in Georgia, business connections. Not all of them are clean, but some of them owe me favors. Angela tensed. Mitrofan. What if, he continued carefully, I used those connections not for smuggling or territory, but for something else? What if I help fund refugee programs? Use my logistics networks to transport aid instead of contraband? Pressured officials to expedite asylum cases. Angela sat up, staring at him. Are you serious? I've spent 16 years building an empire on fear, Mitrofan said quietly. Maybe it's time I built something on hope instead. He met her gaze. You said I had options. Show me what they are. 2 months later, Angela stood in the Tbilisi IRC center, translating for a Syrian family as they met with a housing coordinator. The mother, Amira, was explaining in broken English why they needed a ground floor apartment. Her son had lost his leg in an airstrike and couldn't manage stairs. Angela relayed this in fluent Arabic, then translated the coordinator's response. When the meeting ended successfully, Amira gripped Angela's hands with tears in her eyes. Shukran, she whispered. Thank you. You gave us our voice. Angela smiled, her own eyes damp. You've always had your voice. I just helped others hear it. As Amira's family left, Angela's supervisor, Nadia, a formidable Georgian woman in her 50s, approached with an odd expression. Angela, there's someone here to see you. He's been waiting in my office for an hour. Angela's heart skipped. Who? Says his name is Mitrofan Golubev. And he's brought. Well, you should see for yourself. Angela followed Nadia to her office, her pulse racing. She hadn't seen Mitrofan in 6 weeks. They'd talked daily, video calls that stretched late into the night, but the distance had been difficult. He told her he was handling business, couldn't leave Moscow yet. She'd understood, tried not to let disappointment color her voice. But now he was here. She pushed open the office door and stopped dead. Mitrofan stood by the window, looking devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater. But it wasn't him that made her breath catch. It was the man standing beside him, Hilarion Bulgakov, looking healthier and stronger than Angela had seen him in months, broke into a radiant smile. Angela, Devachka Moya. She crossed the room in a rush, embracing the old man. Hilarion, what are you doing here? My son finally convinced me to take a vacation, Hilarion said in Russian, his eyes twinkling. And I wanted to see what you've been doing. The work that's so important you left us in Moscow. Angela looked at Mitrofan over Hilarion's shoulder. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Nervous, hopeful, determined. There's more, Mitrofan said. Can we talk? Privately. Nadia tactfully excused herself. Hilarion patted Angela's hand and said, I'll go explore your beautiful city. You two talk. He winked at his son before leaving. When they were alone, Mitrofan crossed to Angela and pulled her into his arms, breathing her in like oxygen. God, I missed you. I missed you too. She pulled back to look at him. Mitya, what's going on? Why are you really here? He took her hand, leading her to the sofa. I need to show you something. He pulled out his phone, navigating to a document. For the past 2 months, I've been working with lawyers, legitimate ones, to establish something. It's called the Svetlana Golubev Foundation. Angela's eyes widened. Your mother's name? Yes. His voice was thick with emotion. It's a humanitarian organization focused on refugee aid, legal assistance, and medical support. I've funded it with $50 million initially, with plans to add more. And I've partnered with the IRC, UNHCR, and several other organizations to coordinate efforts across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Angela stared at him, unable to speak. But that's not all, Mitrofan continued. I'm also opening a legal aid office here in Tbilisi. It'll provide free legal services to refugees navigating asylum processes, fighting deportation, or dealing with human trafficking cases. We'll hire local lawyers, interpreters, social workers. He paused, and I want you to help me run it. What? Angela's voice came out as barely a whisper. Not full-time, he clarified quickly. You'd still work with the IRC. That's your passion, and I'd never take that from you. But maybe a few hours a week, you could help coordinate translation services, train other interpreters, bridge the gap between the foundation and the people who need it most. He squeezed her hand. You'd be perfect for it, Angela. You understand both worlds, the people seeking help and the systems that can provide it. Tears spilled down Angela's cheeks. You did all this for me. No. Mitrofan wiped away her tears with his thumb. I did this for me. Because you showed me there was another way to use power. Because watching you work, hearing the passion in your voice when you talk about helping people, it made me want to be better. To build something that would make my mother proud instead of ashamed. His voice cracked. I can't erase the blood on my hands, Angela. I can't undo 16 years of violence. But maybe I can balance the scales. Maybe I can turn my empire into something that creates life instead of taking it. What about your other business? Angela asked quietly. The Mafia. I'm getting out. The words hung in the air like a confession. Not all at once. That would be suicide. But slowly, strategically, I'm liquidating the illegal operations. Transitioning to legitimate businesses. It'll take years, maybe a decade, but I've started the process. He met her eyes. I won't lie and say I'm becoming a saint. I'll still have enemies. Still have blood in my past that won't wash away. But I'm trying, Angela. For you. For my father. For myself. Angela launched herself at him, kissing him with everything she had. Joy and pride and love, so fierce it hurt. Mitrofan caught her, deepening the kiss, pouring 16 years of loneliness and 2 months of missing her into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Angela pressed her forehead to his. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I haven't done anything yet. Yes, you have. You chose hope over fear, change over stagnation. That's everything. Mitrofan smiled, that real, unguarded smile that transformed his entire face. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, Angela corrected. But I'm glad you didn't have to. Have you ever witnessed someone completely transform their life for love or purpose? What would you sacrifice to become the person you're meant to be? Share your story below. That evening, Mitrofan took Angela and his father to dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Mkvari River. The city lights reflected off the water, and the air smelled of khachapuri and wine. Hilarion watched his son and Angela across the table. The way Mitrofan's hand never left hers. The way they communicated in glances and soft Russian phrases, and his eyes grew misty. Svetlana would have loved you, he told Angela in Russian. She always said Mitrofan needed someone stronger than him, someone who wouldn't let him hide behind his armor. He raised his glass. Thank you, Devachka, for bringing my son back to me, for reminding him he's more than his father's legacy. Angela raised her glass, her heart full. Thank you for raising a man capable of change. They toasted to new beginnings, to second chances, to love that healed instead of hurt. Later, as they walked along the river, Mitrofan pulled Angela close. There's one more thing. More. Angela laughed. You've already rebuilt your entire life in 2 months. What else could there possibly be? Mitrofan stopped walking, turning to face her. The streetlights cast shadows across his face, but his eyes were clear and bright with purpose. Move in with me, he said. Not in Moscow. I know you need to be here for your work, but I bought an apartment in Tbilisi, 10 minutes from the IRC center. Big enough for 2, 3, if my father visits, which he will. He cupped her face. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I've waited 32 years to feel this way about someone, and I don't want to waste another day pretending I can live without you. Angela's heart thundered. Mitrofan. You don't have to answer now, he said quickly. Think about it. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that I'm here. I'm committed, and I'm not going anywhere. Angela looked up at this man, this complicated, dangerous, beautiful man who'd turned his life upside down for her, who'd chosen redemption over reputation, who'd proven that even the hardest hearts could learn to love. Yes, she said. Mitrofan blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll move in with you. Angela smiled through happy tears. Because you're right. We've wasted enough time, and I don't want to spend another night without you. Mitrofan's laugh was pure joy. He swept her up, spinning her around despite his still healing shoulder, kissing her like she was air and he'd been drowning. When he finally set her down, both of them breathless and laughing, Angela realized something profound. This was what Babushka Vera had meant. Living big. Choosing love, even when it was complicated. Even when it was dangerous. Even when the safe choice would have been easier. Because love, real love, wasn't about safety. It was about finding someone worth being brave for. And Mitrofan Golubev, for all his flaws and darkness, was worth every risk. 1 year later, Angela stood in the garden of the Svetlana Golubev Foundation headquarters, a renovated historic building in the heart of Tbilisi that now housed legal offices, translation services, and community spaces for refugees. Spring had arrived with explosive beauty. Cherry blossoms dotted the courtyard, and the air hummed with voices in a dozen languages: Arabic, Dari, Russian, Georgian, English, all blending into a symphony of survival and hope. Today was the official grand opening, and over 200 people had gathered. Refugees who'd been helped by the foundation, IRC staff, local officials, and journalists covering what had become an unlikely success story. A former Russian mafia boss turned humanitarian. Angela watched from the doorway as Mitrofan stood at a podium, his father beside him in a wheelchair. Hilarion had suffered another small stroke 6 months ago, but he was stable, happy, and according to his doctors, thriving in ways that defied medical explanation. Love is good medicine, Hilarion had told Angela in Russian when she'd visited him in the hospital. Better than any pill. Now, Mitrofan was speaking, in Russian first, then English, his voice steady and clear. My mother, Svetlana Golubev, believed that every person deserved dignity. That no matter where you came from or what circumstances brought you to a foreign land, you had inherent worth. He paused, emotion flickering across his face. I spent most of my life forgetting that lesson, building walls instead of bridges, choosing fear over hope. But someone reminded me that it's never too late to change. Never too late to become the person you were meant to be. His eyes found Angela in the crowd, and the love in his gaze made her breath catch even after a year together. This foundation exists because of one woman's courage. Mitrofan continued. A woman who spoke kindness to a lonely old man on a plane, who refused to see people as transactions or threats, but as human beings worthy of compassion, who showed me that real power isn't about control, it's about service. Angela's eyes filled with tears as people turned to look at her, applause rippling through the crowd. So today, as we open these doors, we do so with a promise, Mitrofan said, that every person who walks through them will be seen, will be heard, will be given the tools to rebuild their lives with dignity and hope. Because that's what my mother would have wanted, and that's what the woman I love has taught me is possible. More applause. Hilarion was wiping his eyes, and Angela was making her way through the crowd toward the podium. Mitrofan stepped down to meet her, pulling her into his arms despite the cameras and the audience. Did I do okay? He murmured in Russian. You were perfect, Angela whispered back. The celebration continued for hours. Angela translated for Syrian families meeting with lawyers, helped Afghan children find the art therapy rooms, introduced Chechen refugees to social workers who spoke their language. Everywhere she looked, she saw hope taking root. Nadia from the IRC found her near sunset, as the crowd began to thin. You've done something remarkable here, Angela. We've done it together, Angela corrected. The IRC's partnership made this possible. No, Nadia shook her head, smiling. You saw potential where others saw danger. You loved someone everyone said was irredeemable. And look what grew from that faith. She gestured at the building, the gardens, the people laughing and crying and healing. This is what happens when someone refuses to let fear win. After Nadia left, Angela found Mitrofan and Hilarion sitting on a bench beneath the cherry trees. The old man was dozing, his head tilted back, peaceful in the dappled sunlight. Mitrofan looked up as Angela approached, and the expression on his face, contentment, purpose, love, was everything she'd hoped to give him when she'd first spoken Russian to his father on that plane. He's happy, Mitrofan said softly, nodding toward Hilarion. Really happy. For the first time since my mother died. I think he's found peace. In you. Angela sat beside him, taking his hand. Have you found peace? Mitrofan considered this. I found something better. I found purpose. He squeezed her fingers. The other businesses, the illegal ones, are almost completely liquidated. Another 6 months, and I'll be out entirely. It's been dangerous, navigating the transition, but you're doing it. Angela finished. You're actually doing it. Because of you. No, Angela said firmly, echoing Nadia's words. Because of you. I just showed you it was possible. You did the hard work. Mitrofan pulled her closer, kissing her temple. We make a good team. The best team. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Finally, Mitrofan shifted, reaching into his jacket pocket. I have something for you, he said, his voice suddenly nervous in a way that made Angela's heart skip. He pulled out a small velvet box. Angela's breath stopped. Before you panic, Mitrofan said quickly, this isn't what you think. Or maybe it is. I don't know. I'm terrible at this. He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a single gray stone, smoky quartz, the exact color of Angela's eyes. This was my mother's. My father gave it to me 6 months ago and said I'd know when the time was right. Angela stared at the ring, tears blurring her vision. I'm not asking you to marry me, Mitrofan continued, his words tumbling out. Not yet. I know we're still building our life together, still figuring out how to balance your work and mine, still navigating what it means to love someone from completely different worlds. But I wanted you to have this, to know that you're not just important to me. You're essential. You're family. And when you're ready, when we're both ready, I want to make it official. He took the ring from the box, holding it up to catch the fading light. This is a promise, Angela. A promise that I'm yours. Completely. That I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of you. That I'll build a life you're proud to be part of. His voice dropped to a whisper. So will you accept this? Not as an engagement, but as a promise of one. Angela's tears spilled over. She held out her right hand. Not her left. Not yet. And watched as Mitrofan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Я принимаю, she whispered in Russian. I accept. And Mitya, I'm already proud. So proud of who you become. Who you're becoming. Mitrofan exhaled shakily, relief and joy flooding his face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Because she was. Hilarion stirred beside them, opening his eyes and smiling at the sight of his son holding the woman who'd saved them both. Korosho, he murmured. Good. Very good. 2 years later, on a crisp autumn evening in St. Petersburg, Angela Kovaleva became Angela Golubev in a small ceremony attended by family, friends, and more than a few former refugees who'd become like family. She wore a simple white dress and her grandmother's pearls. Mitrofan wore a dark suit and the expression of a man who couldn't quite believe his luck. Hilarion, now 80 and frilier but still sharp as ever, walked Angela down the aisle and whispered in Russian, My Svetlana is watching, and she approves. They exchanged vows in both Russian and English, promises to love through danger and peace, through change and consistency, through all the complicated beauty of building a life together. And when the officiant pronounced them married, when Mitrofan kissed his bride as cherry blossoms fell around them like snow, Angela thought of that first flight, of an old man sitting alone, of a choice to speak kindness in a language of home. She thought she was just doing her job. She hadn't known she was opening a door to a completely different life. What are you thinking? Mitrofan murmured against her lips, their foreheads pressed together. Angela smiled, her heart so full it hurt. I'm thinking that my babushka was right. Language isn't just words. It's connection. It's home. It's everything you are when no one's watching. And what am I? Mitrofan asked softly. Yours, Angela said simply. Completely, impossibly, wonderfully yours. Mitrofan's laugh was pure joy. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing about you. They kissed again, surrounded by the people they loved, in a city that had survived wars and revolutions and terrible leadership, but had never stopped being beautiful. Because beauty, like love, didn't need permission to exist. It just needed someone brave enough to speak it into being. And Angela Golubev, formerly Kovaleva, always a bridge builder, had proven that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was speak to someone in the language of their heart. The rest was just details. Beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect details. What would you do if a simple act of kindness opened the door to a completely different life? How has speaking someone's language, whether literal or emotional, change your world? Drop your most powerful story of connection in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you've built bridges in your own life.